The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
The great Anton Karas, who played the theme song and all of the music for The Third Man. And prior to that was Julian Assange at an anti-war demonstration in London back in 2010. I'm Randy Credico. This is Randy Credico Live on the Fly. I'm here with my accompaniment, Rafi Dlugoff. Rafi Dlugoff is, go ahead, Rafi, you can, I can't see Rafi. All right, there he is. All right, there he is. Rafi Dlugoff is a very close friend of mine. And he's played on, I think, 2 of these programs. All right. And he's awfully loud right now if you can't hear me. You play a little softer, Rafi. And so we are continuing our series here, Assange Countdown to Freedom, and with our stand-ups for Assange. Not that we're going to talk about Julian Assange, but we may, with our comic tonight, our comedian, our satirist, a very close friend of mine by the name of Danny Vitale, who was a former cast member of Saturday Night Live, but that's the least of his credits. He's a comics comic. He's a great comedian, and he's one of my close, if not my closest friend. Now that all of my other friends have passed away, he is my closest friend. He's moved up, and he actually looks like Julian Assange today when he got, where are you going, Rafi? When he got arrested back a year ago in April. He actually has the same, actually have the same beard. So Kenny is now joining us from Hell's Kitchen. And it's great to see you again, my good friend, Danny Vitale. I hope that's not rum and Coca-Cola.
Oh, this?
Yeah.
No, that's, you know why I drink it from the mason jar?
Why?
Watch Steve Bannon at night, and he drinks coffee from a mason jar while he talks to his flunkies.
Are you a big fan of Steve Bannon?
Do you know I don't agree with 99.3% of him politically, but I think he's, I don't know, there's something fascinating about the guy. I just like listening to him. I like listening to intelligent people. Even when I know that they're like irrationally insane, I still am compelled to listen to like insane people for some reason.
What's the 0.7% that you agree with him on?
All right, listen, you know that I'll never go one-to-one with you on politics, but from my limited information, I believe, okay, in a very general way, that Red China, as we used to call it, the CCP, they're a very, very bad group of people.
Wait a second. That's what they think about us.
I don't doubt.
We're the ones that have 400 bases surrounding China. 400 bases. How many do you think surround us that are from China?
I doubt very many. None.
I bet you can count it on one finger. All right? So he's got you convinced that
Okay.
Red China, which is not even Red China anymore.
I know it's the CCP, but listen to me. Let me ask you this then. I know you're interviewing me, but I got to ask you a question. Don't you think that what they're doing in Hong Kong is deplorable? You froze on me.
Because this is why are we focusing on what's going on there instead of focusing on what's going on here?
Because it doesn't.
Who do you think is instigating those protests there? There's a lot of right-wing fascists that are instigating those. Did you know that are in Hong Kong? But it's so easy to manipulate public opinion here. And it's for a reason that they're doing that.
Right. And you know,
I mean, don't you question why the mainstream media is focusing on Hong Kong protests instead of what's going on?
I don't think that they actually, to tell you the truth, mainstream media, which I probably watch more mainstream than you do, I have a feeling you have much hipper inside information than I'll ever get to. But I mean, I have to turn off mainstream media because they show the same loop over and over. It's like, yeah, okay.
Well, they do a lot of stuff on Hong Kong, and we only get one side of it. And who's instigating the protests in Hong Kong?
Who's instigating it?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I guess I was under the naive impression that there were people in Hong Kong who still value their autonomy and their liberty, and that
that's the narrative of it. But we have no idea here because we're only being spoon-fed information about it from MSNBC and from CNN and Fox.
Right.
That's it. We don't get it from any other sources. Except for the Western press, and they have a hard-on for China. I think that they have more liberties in Hong Kong, and I don't want to really get into this for the 4 minutes that we have left, you know, about what's going on in Hong Kong. But
I just thought that someday we would get to go there, me and you. We'd hang out, and we'd
Well, tell me, where is it good in the U.S.? Tell me where it's like really good here. I mean, with the police. Is there a good spot here to protest?
No.
Has there been?
You know what I really think is going to get ugly? What are they calling it now out in Seattle? The CHOP. C-H-O-P. The CHOP, that like 2 mile.
Yeah, of course they're going to come down on them like they did in 1870.
They're calling it the summer of love, and the mayor's very like, oh, let them do it. And you know that someday they're just going to go like, okay, we've had enough.
The same way they did in Dog Day Afternoon, right?
Exactly.
All right.
Keep the gun up, Sal.
All right. So you know that the shoe is going to drop. It's probably going to drop on protesters in the United States. They're just trying to figure out how to do it. But it's such a complicated morass that it's difficult to focus on it.
One thing that I am proud of that I saw in mainstream media, I don't know if it was CNN or somebody last night, that I called 2 months ago. I said, I don't care how much money, how this guy's going to do it, who he's going to muscle in on, Big Pharma or whoever, who he's going to blackmail. But I will guarantee you that by the end of October, there'll be some sort of vaccine out on the market. And they actually reported that last night, that's like coming, that from
the October surprise, is that it?
Yeah, exactly. Because this guy knows that there's no way that if people are still dropping dead and wearing masks and not able to open anything up, that he's going to have any chance of winning, you know? So I called that. I said, I guarantee you that even if it's like CBD mixed with like apple cider vinegar, he'll get somebody to pay him off and tell him like, no, this works, you know? So that's that.
Yeah. So drinking a lot of coffee these days, huh? That's like the Orson Welles look when he was wearing sunglasses and a big beard, was on the Tonight Show.
No, I only had the glasses on because I was trying to read the things on the computer. Yeah, well, I'm not quite as fat as Orson on the Tonight Show days, but I don't have any magic tricks to show you. But,
you know, he actually hosted the Tonight Show way back when Johnny was so comfortable he let anyone like do a couple of days out of the week. Sub-hosting.
Blake hosted the Tonight Show. I remember it once.
Yeah, Robert Blake did it, and so did McLean Stevenson, and all of these other names that Peter Bogdanovich did a impression. I saw him actually sub-hosting for Johnny Carson.
Really?
But you know that Jay Leno never let anybody sub-host for him.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But actually, when you really think about it, like for guys like me and you, didn't the Tonight Show, I mean, yeah, it's still the Tonight Show, even with Jimmy Fallon, but didn't the Tonight Show sort of stop being really the Tonight Show when Johnny left?
Yeah. When he left, it was all over. You know, it was like Archie Bunker's place.
You know, I never realized that I liked Letterman that much until he was like the last man standing. And then like his last couple of years, he was actually, you know, very watchable to me. But then after he left, I know that Colbert says all the right things, and he appeals to
just not funny.
He's just absolutely not funny. He's the unfunniest guy I've ever seen.
He's like Jose Jimena. He had one character. That's it, right?
While we're on the Tonight Show, just since you mentioned it, and I'm not like, you know, trying to like, you know, curry favor with you or anything, but one of the things that's always bothered me when you were getting like, you know, like your mass of recent publicity and you were on Ari Melba and you were really being covered a lot, and me and a buddy of mine, my friend Tom, who's actually a fan of yours, and whenever they would introduce you, they'd go, former talk show host and activist, Randy Credico. And I'd go, and we'd look at each other, we'd go, this guy was like one of the best political comedians of his generation. He did the Tonight Show. How come they never mentioned that?
They never did. They never mentioned the Tonight Show at all.
But isn't that, I mean, it was like my friend Tom, who's like not as close a friend to you, you've met him, but he would always go, how do they let that go? This guy was like the Marlon Brando of political comedy in the 80s and 90s. You know, you were doing it.
Never came up. You know, everyone said I was a Roger Stone associate, show host. But, you know, that was an avocation. It wasn't an avocation being a Roger Stone associate. It really was not. But I certainly was you know, doing like what I'm doing right now is more of an avocation. But I did political humor I started doing comedy in 1974, and I did it up until like 1999 when we were working the Monkey's Paw, and then I dropped out, ran the concert fund for 15 years, but I still was doing stand-up, but it never came up. You know, it's like I gave Ari Melber like footage of me on television, whether it be the Tonight Show or even at the Improv, and they weren't interested in it.
You know what I didn't like about the Ari Melba interviews was that you would go on and you'd answer his questions, and you were obviously, you know, big in the news then. But Ari Melba, who like, whenever I do occasionally watch him, he's always like loose and cool, and he'll have some rapper on, and he's like loose and funny. But when you would try and like joke around or like do one of your impressions, he would like kind of get like real serious. Like, okay, we don't really have time for that now, you know?
Right. It's, you know, MSNBC hosts is what we call a dull lot. All right. They're a dull lot. And he tries to be funny. He tries to be culturally hip with his hip hop guys that he puts on Friday night with the fallback, which is he should fall back on the fallback, because once that comes on, I shut him off. You know what I mean? I totally shut him off, and he wasn't interested in that. He was only interested in a narrative that he had preordained, and I was part of that preordained narrative, that I was some kind of back channel to Julian Assange, which, of course, you knew that was complete bullshit. But that was the story that they presented, and he had to run with it, right?
Getting back to the beginning of the conversation, I asked you once, years ago, we were down at the Yippee Cafe. You remember, like, our Yippee Cafe days?
Yes.
And
how can I forget?
All of a sudden,
it had the worst smell of cat piss. It really did. You had to go in there with a gat. Forget about it. If I had, see, I got a mask now.
Right.
I should have worn this when I was at the Yippee Museum Cafe.
Yeah, that may have been, the Yippee Cafe may have been less hygienic than the Wuhan meat market.
Maybe it started out, maybe this virus started out at the Yippee Museum Cafe.
The Yippee Cafe was the Wuhan wet market of comedy. When we were down there.
No one ever made it out of there alive.
You couldn't invite people. It was like living in an alcoholic family where, like, you never knew. You couldn't really, like, invite people home. You know, like, yeah, come over to my house. We'll play in my room, because you never knew. I never knew if my mother was going to be blackout drunk. Throwing a bottle of Seagrams at the wall.
Of all the clubs in the world, I would say that was the worst. And you and I have worked a lot of bad clubs. We started out. I got Raffy behind us.
Raffy washes his hands.
You know the music Cute? You know this?
Raffy washes hands nice and...
Raffy's, but he's breathing heavily on me right now.
Yeah.
He definitely wants me to get what he may have.
You know what the great thing about, with Raffy? Raffy doesn't get out much, so he has very little chance of picking up the COVID.
He goes from his place all the way down a quarter block to Mamoon's falafel joint.
Right. That one's ours.
Yes, you know that joke. Yes, the
your joke.
Mamoon's, yes. So, did you ever work the Village Gate for Raffy, or were you too hip for the room?
I did do like a couple of guest spots, and I'm not 100% sure if Raffy was there those nights, but I'll tell you a funny story about the Village Gate. I lived on Long Island, and I would come in by train, like as a teenager, to check out comedy clubs, and I thought I was going to be an actor. But anyway, I finally moved in, so it's like 1979, and there was a guy named Adam Leslie who's since passed. Do you remember Adam?
What do you mean? I used to do a lot of blow with him. I used to.
Of course. Yeah. Who am I kidding? Of course you knew Adam.
I used to drink with him. He robbed me. He gave me a pill.
Okay, wait, stop.
I was out with him and his. I actually had a threesome with him and his girlfriend.
I know. Don't even go any further, because I know that story, and that's not something you want, like, on YouTube.
No, well, it was just me and her.
Anyway,
all right.
1979.
That was 1987 or 88.
1979, and I barely, maybe I'd done like some open mics, and I really thought like I had something, but I probably had nothing. So there was an ad backstage, and it says the Village Gate is going to start a new comedy venue, and they're looking for new acts. So show up on such and such a day in the afternoon. So I was like, I got my little notebook, and I was ready. And I go there, and I walk in, and I go, and somebody points me and says, "Oh yeah, that's the main room there." And I go in, it's completely dark, and no one's sitting there except Adam Leslie's just sitting there. And I went, "Oh, hey, am I here on the wrong day?" And the guy goes, what, are you a comedian? I said, yeah. He goes, hold on. And he gets up, he walks over to like where the light booth was. He turns on all the lights. He puts on the stage light. He turns on the microphone. And then he sits there and he goes, go ahead. So like I had to stand there trying to do an act for one guy, Adam Leslie. And you know, it's like you know, you've seen me perform a million times. I get like, you know,
Yes.
the crowd is
very insecure, man. You need like 5 corner men when you perform.
right, exactly, and a cut man as well.
Right. I know that.
But no, the Village Gate was a wonderful, wonderful venue, and
well, you started really at the, I mean, you started to emerge at this place called the Bitter End. All right. You took over the emceeing when our good friend David Heenan, AKA back then David Copperfield. I mean, he took the name of David Copperfield, who was a Dickens character, and then he was a magician. You would think he'd come up with a different name than that.
I have allergies, by the way. That's why I'm not doing blow.
All right. So, but David Copperfield, back then, actually was David Heenan.
I think he became.
He was the MC. He actually got involved in some kind of scam where they fucked a bunch of people on some land deal, including some Catholic priests in Pennsylvania, and he ended up going to jail for a couple of years. And you took over that room until he came back. He was furious.
He actually, I'd become friends with him. Actually, I met you through Heenan. Because
Right.
I think while he was in prison, you were doing a cruise ship and it let you off in New York.
That's how I first met him in 1980.
Yeah. So, you know, the beautiful thing about Heenan is that, and I don't care, I would say this to his face. I still talk to David. I mean, he was one of the most corrupt, like, you know, like angry, misogynistic. Every bad adjective you could throw at some point or another. And I would hang out with him in the Village during the day, like, you know, because I was like in my early 20s, and you know, it was like he was a fascinating character. He knew everybody, everything. Then at night he would go MC at Dangerfields. So he'd go, Danny, come by Dangerfields. If there's time, I could put you on. So I'd go up to Dangerfields and I'd be like sitting in the back, and then he'd go on stage and the pianist would start playing like this lilting music. And then all of a sudden, David would start singing like Anthony Newley, you know, like he would sing some, you know, like love song. This time we almost made the peace. And all the women in the audience, I remember like they'd be like, oh, and I went, if they only knew what a fucking, like, what a fucking angry, fucking conniving fuck this was.
Well, you know, you have a lot of followers out there. You're kind of a comics comic, and there are a lot of people out there. I know Leah Krinsky is a big
right
fan.
How's the lighting on me? How's the lighting on me? All right?
It's fine.
Okay.
I'm saying you have a lot of fans out there. Leah Krinsky, Nancy Shane, Lou DiMaggio, and tons of others that Bill Sheff. A lot of people who don't like me, don't particularly like me, but they like a lot of these comics that like you. I don't understand why, but they like you, but they don't.
You know why?
Like me.
I'm going to explain to you why. Because when you're young and impressionable, right, everything seems bigger. So when a lot of these comics came around, I was like sort of skinny back in the 80s. I was kind of handsome, and I had balls. I'd get on stage and I'd say all kinds of crazy shit and all. And that's the image they had of me, because it was like a first impression. Then over the years, as my life and mind and health has spiraled down, they still have that, you know, that image. So that's why they retain that, like, you know, likeness of me, you know.
Well, well, you know, but you were a very funny guy, and you're a very real guy. I mean, you lay it out there. You don't hold anything back.
I don't think any of those people dislike you, by the way. I think you're being hard on yourself.
Well, it really looks like some kind of coffee cocktail that you're drinking.
It is black coffee made with Bustelo in a mason jar.
Wow.
Yeah, okay. I'm getting loaded. I haven't had a drink in 10 years, but I'm getting loaded to do your Zoom cast, okay?
22 days for me.
Cheers, pal.
Remember, that was the big joke, how I had 22 days in.
27, actually.
It was actually 27. All right, so let's go back to the bitter end. You got that gig there. You got that gig at the bitter end. You took over for David Heenan while he was in prison. And then in 1984, you suddenly took off. You had this, like, you know, you were very charismatic, and you were very hot. And Rafi just went to get a drink or another piece of sausage.
Switch to cold water, okay?
I don't know what he's looking for, but he just drifted away to the kitchen. So so you had this like really very quick rocket kind of success that happened in '80.
What happened was
somebody saw you. Where was it that they saw you?
What happened?
This like rapid explosion.
In '82 into '83, and that's when I first knew you, and you would come by and we'd hang at the bitter end. I
remember that woman, Amy, your girlfriend.
Yes. Yes, I remember her.
And we did a lot of coke with that guy, Walter.
Yeah, well, if you could call it coke. I remember, remember Brad, the manager?
Yeah, we had dinner at his house one night.
Yeah. And we would I think I got like $50 to host the gig on a Tuesday night. So I would take the 50 and you'd throw in, like, if you had some cash, and we'd go, Walter, you got to go.
At 4 o'clock in the morning at an after hours joint, after doing the bitter end.
The funniest thing that I ever remember, and I don't know why I remembered this just now, we were sitting in some after hours bar, me, you, probably Amy, and we were just sitting there, and it was like 6 in the morning. It was like one of these after hours clubs that stayed open. And the bartender had just poured a drink in front of me, and you had an umbrella with a duck's beak on it. And you just looked at me and you went, you know, man, this is you. And you just started dipping the duck beak of the umbrella into the drink. And people at the bar started laughing and all. Do you have any remembrance of that?
Yeah, I do. I remember that. That was one of those real seedy bars way back then. We're talking about almost 40 years ago, man. 1983, 84. And so some of the people that passed through at that time at the bitter end.
So what happened was I went from you know what, for like a year or two, people would see me at, like, say, these different little small venues I did.
Yes.
And they would say, hey, man, you should be at, like, Catch or the Improv or something. You're pretty good. And I'd be like, yeah. But like, I didn't really want to get, like, involved in the mainstream. So I enjoyed doing, like, places downtown, like Sweeps. You remember that?
Wait, Sweeps, yeah. Who was the guy who ran that
place where the guy would, like, go, hey, come here. You going up? I got some friends here. And he would pull out a vial of, like, the purest blow I ever had. He'd shove it up your nose. And then you'd be like his, like, coke slave for the rest of the night.
Is that Campbell McLaren?
Well, Campbell was the manager, but I'm talking about these guys were the owners. They were like some mob guys, man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the mob really ran wild back then. I used to gamble on Thompson or the other street next, Sullivan Street. There was a place that had a picture of the Pope
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it was the Gambino guys. I used to go into that place and I would play or place bets, and it was run by Ralphie. Ralphie, his brother was the guy, the crazy guy that walked around with. What was his name?
Ken?
The guy that walked around with the bathrobe. What's his name?
Gigante.
Yeah. So this is his brother, Ralphie.
Right.
Right. He ran that little bookie joint. I'd go in there. They always were nice to me. But that was right there next to that little restaurant. There was one time where I walked into that joint, and David used to bet there too. And I had some money coming. I had like $300 coming. I walk in, and I forgot the name of the guy who was sitting down paying people off, but he gave me like $700. And I looked at it. I knew it was only 300 coming. And I could have walked out with that, but I stopped and I looked at it and I looked at him. And then Ralph Gigante looked at me and says, what's wrong, son? I said, I could have just walked out. I could have said nothing, but I knew it was wrong. So he says, wait a second. He said to Benny was his name. He said to Benny, let me look at those slips. And he went through like 1,000 slips and he finally got to mine. And he says to Benny, he says, he bet the fucking Rams, you asshole. So I did not win that part of the bet. And so I gave him back the $400 or $500. And, I could have gotten away with it, but it certainly wasn't worth the risk.
But you know what? If you would have, like with those guys, if you would have walked out with the extra 4, you would have never stopped thinking about it. Every time you were ever even like near that street, you'd be turning around, wondering like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But, and they would give me a bottle of like Jim Beam or something better than that, Black Label, every year on Christmas. But you didn't fuck around with those guys. No, that's the way the village was back then. And I got to be honest with you, I was there today picking up Raffy, and the whole look of that neighborhood has totally changed for the worse, hasn't it?
I guess I haven't been down there since. Actually, I might have seen Raffy one of the last times I was down there, because I was doing on a Thursday night I was doing like a 10-minute spot. Raffy knows the place. You came by.
Raffy's doing comedy now, No, stop. He stopped. Raffy's changing the subject. Raffy's playing music now.
But tell him, I saw him at the Music Inn. We were hanging out, and it was a nice little room. It was a cool little room, and they'd let and it's like I'd get up to do my thing, and there were no pretenses that it was ever going to lead to anything other than coming back on the next Thursday night to do another 10 minutes. But it was like a chance to do my thing and work organically and not worry about who's judging it, and sometimes I'd leave the Music Inn and I'd walk, because it'd be a nice night, and I'd walk past the old Folk City, which was like one of the first places I ever.
Yeah, Jane. What was that woman's name that used to run that place?
Bruckner.
Oh yeah.
But this is even before that, man.
No. She was like in the early 80s.
No, but I was like a kid. I went there in the late 70s. There were still guys. That's where I met Heenan, and that's where they used to have what they called a hoot night on Tuesday night. And Raffy probably remembers it, right? And there were guys who were like, it was like the late 70s, but everybody still wanted to be like Dylan, but they wanted to be like Dylan from the early 60s. So it was like the late 70s, and there'd be guys going up there with that cap that Dylan wore on like the second album, and they'd be singing like the most depressing folk songs about some Irish seafarer, and then I'd go up and do comedy, or Heenan would go up and go, Danny, these guys are terrible. These are the worst. This is the worst guys I've ever seen. And then they would come off stage and he'd go, you're a great man. I loved it. I love the new one.
Well, that's him. He definitely.
Like, you know, his health was really bad recently, and I never got down to visit him, but I talked to him on the phone a few times. But apparently, he's lost a bunch of weight, and he sits in Washington Square Park every day, and you know, like his office, you know, all the regulars come by, you know.
Well, you know, listen. You're talking about the village. Does he represent the village?
No.
I mean, does he represent the culture of the village politically, culturally?
Well, what does anymore?
I'm asking you.
Yeah.
You take a look at the village over the last couple of 100 years. You know, I used to live there. Aaron Burr used to live there off of Morton Street. And, you know, John Reed, the guy that Warren Beatty played, he lived around the corner on, I forgot the name of the street. And then, of course, Poe lived over there on 3rd Street, I believe. So, I mean, you have, and there's a million.
It wasn't considered hip then.
Well, it was very hip back in the 19 teens and 1920s. The village was very hip, and it was hip for a long period of time. And you had the Village Gate with the great jazz. You had forget about Kenny's Castaways, but you had the bitter end. You had.
Yeah, now you're going back. Now you're talking about like the 50s into the early 60s.
Yeah, you used to hang out there and used to work there. Was one of the great.
You know what I have to tell you what I love about this Zoomcast the best is, as I'm talking to you, Rafi looks like he's taking a nap.
Well, he is. I told him, this is, you know why? This is what the drummer used to do when Don Rickles used to work the conga room at the Sahara.
Right.
Everyone thinks that Don Rickles was this great improv comic. He did the same act every night.
Right.
He made it look like, I mean, when you're working a room of 1,000 people making 200,000 a week, you want to make sure that you play it safe and you get laughs. So the maitre d' would sit the Chinese guy here, he'd sit the African American there, he'd sit the Arab here, a woman here, an overweight guy there, and that's the way it was set up. And he did the same act every night from beginning to end. My friend was Jack. What was his name? No. Jack was the entertainment director and the band leader at the Sahara, and he said that he did the same act every day, and that the drummer used to fall asleep during Rickles' act, would just fall asleep, right, every night, because there'd be like a 10-minute spot where he wasn't playing, and they got so bored with his fucking act because it was the same act every night, but he made it look improvisational. And so, like, Rickles would go nuts when these guys would fall asleep. Jack Eglass, by the way, his name was Jack Eglass. I can't believe I had
You know who I always thought was like a sort of a fascinating character? Because if you probably read the same books I did, like if you read Ladies and Gentlemen, Lenny Bruce, the Lawrence Schiller, and there were two guys who wrote that book. But apparently one of the guys that Lenny ran with in the 50s in LA was Jack Sheldon. And they were both doing all kinds of dope and then Jack Sheldon wound up becoming like, he got a sitcom for like a half a season called Run Buddy Run, which was like this, it only lasted like half a season. And then he wound up in the Merv Griffin band. So whenever Merv Griffin would always go like, hey, and we got Jack in the thing tonight. And I would always go, how did this guy go from like shooting dope with like Lenny Bruce to being in like the,
actually, he was one of the top West Coast musicians. He's on hundreds of jazz albums.
Is he still acknowledged as a great
Oh,
musician?
yeah. And he only died in the last 2 or 3 years.
He's still alive.
On a ton of albums. He died a couple of years ago.
Oh,
He died a couple of years ago.
Because there's actually
You don't like Jack Sheldon?
I loved him. What story did I just tell you? How did you interpret that as like I didn't?
I wasn't paying attention.
That's the story of our friendship.
Yeah.
We'd be down in Brooklyn at the Commons, and I'd be up on stage, and suddenly I'd go into an organic riff, kind of based on something I'd half written, and the crowd would go, and I'd be sweating, and then I'd come off, and then I'd come out, because I wanted your approval. For some reason, for 35 years, I've wanted your approval. And I'd come out and you'd go, how did it go? This guy was out smoking an American Spirit, drinking in a Sprite.
No, I was out doing this.
Are you still vaping?
Listen, are you still smoking?
But you know what? I smoke maybe half a dozen American Spirits a day, maybe 5.
Do you think that's any better?
Do I feel any better?
No, you think that American Spirits are any better than True?
No, but they taste better.
All right.
And
Well, there's a lot of tar that goes into the walls of your lung.
yeah, let me just explain something to you. I just turned 64 years old.
You did. You look good, man.
I still carry a lot of weight. My weight's gone up and down my whole life. I did drugs like an animal, like a fiend through the 80s into the 90s. I survived alcoholism, the AIDS epidemic. So far, I'm surviving COVID. I think I'm doing pretty good.
I think so too. The reason why I did this is that I wanted, a lot of people are like, where's Danny these days? Of course, we could say that about any performer that's out there. Where are they?
I was doing the recluse thing before it became sort of, now everybody's sort of mandatory, but I was doing the recluse thing for a couple of years before.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I think doing the recluse thing is but that's not contrived. That's just you.
Yeah.
You're kind of a paranoid guy. You don't like to be around people, right?
Well, I think paranoid might be too strong a word. Easily agitated or, self-indulgent, but paranoid's a bit of yeah, I guess I am a little. But I'll tell you one funny thing. Now it's like, I always see your posts on Facebook. I don't do Twitter. It's just, there's no reason for me because I don't have anything really that I want to say every day. But I have a Facebook account and, I have access to social media. But about 5 years ago, I did the Mark Maron.
Yeah, that was a big hit, man. I heard all about it.
So
you guys are very close, right? You used to watch him every night when he did his show at you and Bill Hicks used to walk in.
I think it was the other way around, brother.
I'm joking.
But
well, I don't think he likes me at all. I don't think that guy likes me at all because I know that we used to walk out on him. I'll be honest right now. You don't have to admit to this, but I know Hicks and I used to walk out on Maron when he was on, and he'd go crazy.
We walked out on everybody, man.
Huh?
We walked out on everybody.
Right.
You and Hicks were like the unholy trio of Oh, you know what I found, man? And I bet you don't have this. In 92, it was somewhere around there, me and you were hanging out, and we were doing a lot of sets at, I don't know, the Improv and the New York Comedy or something.
Yeah.
Bouncing around. And Hicks had just started to just become this big hit. So he did an interview. There was this new magazine.
Well, he had moved to New York at that time.
He had what?
To New York at that time.
He had moved to New York, and what happened was some new comedy magazine came out, and they did, their big thing was that they had an exclusive interview with Hicks. And while they were interviewing him, they asked him what comedians does he like, and he said, well, right now the only two comedians I really watch all the time are Dan Vitale and Randy Credico.
In that order, or you didn't do it alphabetically?
Okay, maybe it was. I watch Randy Credico. Oh, and Dan Vitale.
But I know the three of us used to hang out and watch each other.
But that thing,
and we go to that coffee shop. We'd go to that coffee shop, or the West End coffee shop. Was that it?
The West Way.
Right.
But the thing is that up me and you, yeah, you already were, you'd done the Tonight Show. I'd been around SNL. We had done stuff, but Hicks was such a hit that it kind of like upped our stock,
right.
Because people would go, these are the guys that he watches, So, right. But
we really had a nice thing going there back then, and we talked a lot of. I gave him a couple of lines, and he became, because he really wasn't that political back in the late '80s up until the early '90s, and then he became more political. He was always funny. He was socially very astute, and his observations were great, and he was, right on and razor sharp. But then he got more political, and I gave him a couple lines that he used. One of them being the one about those wearing those Desert Storm shirts, were the same people 2 years earlier that were wearing the Batman shirts, and I gave that to him. And but he was great. He was.
Why did you give it to him? You should have kept it for yourself.
It was. Look, I had so much stuff back then on Gulf War. There was so much stuff that I had done, and of course, it was taking me nowhere. No one was interested. I did even at the Improv, and I got booed back in 1991. I got booed when I talked about the Gulf War and was taking a anti-American stance. But the thing is, I met him in '89, I think, when he was working at the Tropicana in Las Vegas at that Bob Kephart Tropicana Comedy Club, right? And so back then, I would do my Vegas act. He talked about, when I met Credico, he was doing like Nicholson and Popeye, and I did my Vegas act when I was doing that show. And I was reserving, because I had been to Nicaragua already like a dozen times doing my really radical left-wing stuff. I'd done all these things with Kunstler. But when I did the Improv in Vegas, I would like do the most commercial stuff I could possibly do to survive that fucking, the Vegas, bridge and tunnel, as it were, type of audience. And so he always thought that I would, until he saw me in New York with you. He said, wait a second, you're not the same guy I saw in Las Vegas.
Well, what happened was,
three of us really.
In '83, I went to, it's like around '83, me and you both graduated from the Village, and I went to the Improv, but you wound up going to Catch. And I didn't really see you.
Right.
And then I remember I came over to Catch one night and watched you, and you had really sort of reinvented yourself at that point. I mean, you'd always.
I didn't reinvent myself. I did the same type of stuff.
That was meant as a compliment, by the way.
No, I know, but I remember when I did the Catch a Rising Star.
Listen.
I'd been working Dangerfields at that time, and you and I both had matriculated at that time from those clubs, and we simultaneously, you got Saturday Night Live, and I got the Tonight Show back in 1984. All right, so we're gonna take a short musical break.
Okay.
I have to take a piss.
Okay.
Right? I gotta take a piss and come right back. Rappy's gonna play, I think, "Cute" by Neil Hefti.
And I don't want to play that.
He doesn't want to play that.
To play Crazy Guys, the Chet Baker version.
All right, he'll play Giant Steps in E. How about Giant Steps in E? Can you do that? No.
Do I have to do anything while you take a break?
No, I'm taking a 1 minute break. I'll be
All
right
back. I'm going to stay right here.
All right, so Raffy's going to play the piano and come up with something, a New York tune. What about, no. What about, I Love New York in June?
Yeah. All
All right, he's going to play I Love New
Hey,
York.
get him a cup of coffee or something. He looks
We're in
like
June here. We're having a good time. We'll be right back with Dan
get him
Vitale.
an espresso or something. He looks like he's ready to nod out.
I'll be right back. I'll get him some coffee.
I'm afraid because then I know he'd come.
All right.
Hey, I just wanted to say something to you, man. That's
All right. It's Rafi DeLugoff, folks.
beautiful, man.
Wasn't that nice?
Really nice.
This is like the hippest show I've ever done, man.
Great. Hey, I just want to say something. 10-year, this
Move over,
July,
Rafi, so they can see you.
this July
Hey,
13th,
stand up and take a bow. Rafi DeLugoff. All right. There he is.
July 13th of this year will be 10 years since I've taken a drink. And I can't tell you how great sobriety is.
What are you drinking there? Why is it so great?
I was making a joke that obviously you didn't see me
Right,
shake.
right. You're shaky. I'm sorry, man. You know what the problem is that Zoom is shaky. So it was in sync. It didn't look like you were shaking. This is your first Zoom appearance and one of your first national appearances since you did the very popular Mark Maron show. Now, he's one of your favorite comics, right? I mean, he's gotten a lot better, right?
Can I be honest with you?
Yeah.
When I first met Mark, I think he came down from like, one of those guys came from Boston, like the Apollo and CK and everything. And Mark had a little bit of an attitude when I first knew him. And like, are you getting like are people tweeting you, telling you how great this show is?
No, because it's not live.
Oh,
I'm actually sending a message to the engineer, if you'd like to know.
okay.
All right?
You know what? Mark, I felt friendly with him, and I know that he really respected me as a comedian. That made me feel good. Like guys like him and Louis when they were like young. And then when I saw them sort of like become who they became. But the way I got that I did the Marin podcast was I was moving into this apartment from an apartment across the street. And I had a box full of like, stuff that notes and stuff that just I'd thrown in a box. I found this little sliver of paper and it said Mark Maron had his number. So I said, this can't possibly still be the guy's number. So I punched it and I called him. And he had been talking to Dom Herrera on his podcast about me. So he said, listen, when I'm in New York, let's do the podcast. So we did it, and I got a lot of great feedback from it. And then we kind of stayed in touch a little bit. And then only recently, and I'm being serious, he had his partner, I guess it wasn't his wife, it was his partner. She was a pretty well-known director named Lynn Shelton, and she died suddenly.
Are you serious?
I'm absolutely serious.
Oh, that's horrible, man.
So
my heart goes out to him.
So I didn't.
Wait a second. That happened then or recently?
This only happened like a month ago.
Oh, that's just
so
terrible, man.
I still had his number.
Out to him.
I hadn't talked to him for a couple of years. So I said, maybe I shouldn't call him. He might be really, because it was all over the scroll on CNN and stuff like that. And so I said, you know what, screw it. I know this guy for 25 years. I'm going to call him and so I got on the phone and I just said, hey, Mark, listen, man, if you can't stay on the phone, I understand it if you're busy. I just wanted to give my condolences. And there was a pause and he just went, hey, Danny, nobody's busy these days. And so we wound up talking for like an hour. I guess in that moment, I realized that, we were very good friends because we could really, talk at a time like that when the guy was still going through something, going through something that heavy, So, I know. I think you were meant that you had.
Like I said, my heart goes out to the guy.
But he's
really matured as a internet talk show host.
With the podcast?
Yeah, big podcast. This podcast is like, I wish this podcast was as popular, but I'm dealing with an unpopular individual to most Americans, and that's Julian Assange. And, this show is actually called Assange Countdown to Freedom.
No, that was a
you haven't said a fucking thing good about Julian Assange.
That tape
the last 30 minutes.
The Rick Overton one last night, and that snippet you played at the beginning of Julian talking about how
the same one I played tonight for this one.
Oh, how every war is based on these lies. Every war is based on these lies. I got like chills. It was fantastic.
Well, what do you think of the as a comic? I mean, you're not a political satirist, but about this persecution of him and the lack of comedians out there supporting him. I mean, it's like, are all comedians Hillary Clinton supporters and they blame him for her loss rather than her?
Can I just tell you this? I probably know more about Julian Assange because I'm your friend and because you've done such a great job talking about him and supporting him. Don't forget, when you had your BAI show, I used to listen to you every week, and I would listen to the people that you interviewed. I forget the guy's name, Brian from...
You're talking about Craig Murray.
Craig Murray.
Oh, you're a big fan of Craig Murray, right?
I love the guy. And then there was the other guy, the Australian doctor.
Yeah, you're talking about John Pilger.
Wonderful man. And so I would listen to your show all the time, and I got more and more informed about what was going on with Julian Assange. And then when I saw what they did to him, when they dragged him out of that embassy in the Chilean embassy, where was he, in London?
The Ecuadorian embassy.
The Ecuadorian embassy, sorry. I mean, it really, I felt it viscerally that this was a guy who was standing up for what he believed in, and he was really, really paying the price big time. And
He
that,
had balls. I mean, you talk about balls, right? To go up against the U.S. system like that. How many comics do you know have those kind of balls?
no, but here's the answer to your original question, which is that, yeah, I'm still sort of a comic. I don't know if this massive thing ever lifts, if I'll ever find an audience again. Who knows? And I don't really care. But I'm a comic. I didn't know that much. I mean, I knew what the basic premise of what was going on with Julian Assange, but through you, I learned a lot more. Most of these people, they're not that informed. But they're not just not informed about Julian Assange. They're not informed about a lot of things. Like, I listen to these guys like that are consider themselves political comedians now, and I realize, like, you know, me and you had a conversation many years ago. We're hanging out, and I was up, and I have no clue what it was. I was talking something about Jesse Jackson or something. Remember Jesse Jackson?
Yeah.
Did about getting the hostages out.
Yeah, with the blow. Yeah.
Bring the blow.
That was one of the great bits of all time. Is how Jesse Jackson would go to any country and get hostages out. You said he had the best blow in the world. He'd say, hey,
No, because he
get the guy out to give him a little bump.
have the guy with his arm, and the helicopter blade would be running. He'd go, yeah, man. No, we're gonna bring them girls here later. Here, do a little of this, bro. Here, take one more hit of that. Yeah, get in the plane, man. Get in the plane. Remember that? He'd be telling the hostage, get in the plane. Yeah, brother, we're coming back later. Yeah, you know, he was like, so we had talked about it, and you said to me, well, you know, that's not really political humor. That's topical humor. You're bringing somebody from the news and you're making a funny bit. And I said, I completely understand that. I don't consider myself a political humorist, you know. But there's a lot of these guys, and this is one of those things that I completely agree with you, where, like, all of a sudden, guys who never showed one iota of any social consciousness, now all of a sudden they're like, you know, especially like on Facebook.
Oh, the guys that attack me all the time, Joy
Like,
Behar, Rick Siegel.
Go up on the West Coast, but in New York, like if a guy got on the phone and started telling you, when I see you, I'm gonna beat your ass, and you know, and we call them telephone tough guys, because in other words, the guy was all tough on the phone, but then when you saw him in person, the guy would like be like it. But like most of these guys on Facebook, they're like telephone tough guys, you know? They all got this hard ass stance that they're taking. But, you know, it's ridiculous because it's just they're typing meaningless stuff most of the time, you know? It's, you know.
I mean, especially these comedians today that are suddenly, and you know, I've been doing this, Barry Crimmins did it since the early 80s, political humor, and suddenly they're political. I mean, look at Joy Behar's posts, and she like castigates me because I attack Andrew Cuomo, who I really know. I know what a racist he is. I know how he is responsible for this corona crisis, and she's telling me to shut up. Now, wait a second. Who the fuck is she to even talk to me about politics? Because I remember back at the bitter end that Randy's always talking about politics. Nobody cares. And I was like talking about Reagan back then. She never mentioned Reagan in her act at all. Nobody did. You know, I was one of the few that was talking about this back then. Barry was, and a few others. But no other comic was. Tell me one.
Of our generation, none.
All right, so we look at it today. Now, suddenly these people
Well,
are
wait a second.
because they hate Trump so much.
You put
Well,
me in
yeah.
a very bad position because actually, even though I have not seen her for many years, I have to admit Joy has never been anything but like totally like really nice to me.
And me too. No, I like her. I'm just saying, I'm like, wait a second. Don't tell me what to say, though, because you were never doing anything political. Why didn't you join me when I was in the trenches way back in the 80s? Why didn't you join me then? I mean, because Reagan is no better than Trump.
You know what? I remember there was you, and I remember I met him through you, I guess, and then I later became pretty good friends with Barry Crimmins. I considered him like a strong political comedian.
Oh yeah, he was really not just a political comedian. Barry Crimmins was an activist, and he put his livelihood on the line many times because of the stances that he took. Barry Crimmins. So he used comedy. Well, that's not funny to me. Well, what do you want to talk about? McDonald's? You want to talk about sex? You know, you want to talk about defecating. I mean, you know, you want to talk about airplane humor. All right. So he didn't do that. Those people did that. And now they come back because Trump is such an odious figure. Yeah, I understand that. But do they know how bad the Democrats have been for the last years?
You know what I often think, though, sometimes when I see, I mean this as a total compliment, but like when I see sometimes you'll post stuff about Trump, which I get, he's horrific. He's the worst scoundrel in office and possibly ever. But for some reason, everybody, all these other comics we're talking about who never expressed political discord before, now suddenly, and like for some reason, when you say something about Trump, I'm almost like, you know, this is beneath him. This is beneath Randy to even like comment on Trump.
Right.
I would almost rather hear you explaining what you really know about what's going on with the other team. You know what I mean?
Well, Trump gets me so upset sometimes that I will do that, and I put that out there, particularly with the kids on the border. But you know, they have to know. People have to know that the kids on the border were also jailed by Obama. They were also their families deported in much bigger numbers than Trump, and Obama went after more whistleblowers than any president under the Espionage Act since Woodrow Wilson. But you know,
I think we both.
You know, some of the people I know, they only have become political under Trump. They were never political or offering political opinions. They were never offering solutions. They didn't criticize the war in Iraq. They didn't criticize the war in Afghanistan. They didn't criticize the Supreme Court. They didn't criticize the Patriot Act. None of these people that I see now who criticize me when I criticize Andrew Cuomo, and I know him better than anybody else. I got some friends of ours that like to chime in and say, hey, hold it down. Well, when Trump's gone, we're going to have the same fucking problems with Biden that we need to get rid of, which are wars, which is mass surveillance, which is the Patriot Act, which is mass incarceration. The same problems exist, except for this character is so fucking odious, he's easy to go after. Right. But they don't go after the institutions. Do you think that anyone that criticizes me has ever been to a fucking trial or been to a prison or been to a demonstration? You out there, tell me what trial you've been to of a black man that's about to go to prison for 20 years. I've been to hundreds of them. I've been to these drugs things like in Tulia, Texas. What trials have you been to? How many times have you demonstrated outside of a DA's office? What do you really fucking know? They know very little, except for that Trump is so over the top that that's an easy target. But the institutions they know very little about, and they should just keep their fucking mouths shut. Otherwise, I will go after them. I mean,
You know who I was for was Bernie.
well, I was too, because I do a better impression than Larry David. Now, Larry David was never political. Do you
Listen,
remember once in his fucking life when he was political?
Who?
Larry David.
You know, I never knew. I was
Stand-up comic. I'm telling you, around him until he stepped on shit with Seinfeld. It was the dullest comic in the history of comedy.
well. Seinfeld never did a political line probably in his life.
Yeah, but even he will go after Trump right now. They'll all go after Trump with the exception of Nick DiPaolo and that guy with the raspy voice that did the news for Saturday Night Live for a while. No, not Colin. Well, Colin too. Colin is not politically aware. I mean, Colin. These guys are not like readers. Dennis Miller, not a reader. I remember I was at Dennis Miller's apartment, which he sublet from Seinfeld when he got the gig at Saturday Night Live. He had one book in there, which was a thesaurus. And I said to him, I said, wouldn't it be better for you to read books? And when you run across a word you don't understand, you look it up in a thesaurus rather than just taking words out of a thesaurus and putting it out there as if you are S.I. Hawakawa or you're Wordsworth. You know?
You know, Dennis Miller's first line to me was, we both got hired for Saturday Night Live the same week, same day. So I'm walking down the hall at 8H, and Dennis Miller sidles up to me, and he goes, hey, Vitale, pretty soon we'll be banging the Berenson sisters.
Did he say that? Well, what happened to you at Saturday Night Live? Let's get to that now. You actually got, and I hate to drift away from Assange, but he is a rebel. You gotta respect what he does.
You know what?
Why don't these other comedians, like, other than Lee Camp and Jimmy Dore, reach out there and support Assange?
I don't know. You know, Randy, I'm so detached from the comedy community as a whole that I don't.
Come here. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I have no idea what these people's motives are. But you asked me about SNL. You know, we both know a little something about whatever.
Come here.
Who are you talking about?
Bianca, yeah. She's coughing right now, but it's okay. This is improvisational.
I hope you haven't been buying her that bag of treats, because you bought her a bag of treats, and then when you wouldn't give her any, she would just keep barking in front of the bag of treats endlessly.
You saw that, right?
No, I was trying to talk to you on the phone one night, and all I heard was, rah, rah, rah.
Come here. She's right over here. I'm trying to get her into the show. Come here. Come here. Come on. Come on. Come here. Come here. All right. So,
you gave her a dog biscuit with cocaine in it. She had to just keep getting more. She wasn't gonna.
I know. I saw her. She was around the bag, and she couldn't stop sniffing that bag. All right. So I'm gonna get back to Saturday Night Live.
Yeah. All right.
I got the Tonight Show. You got Saturday Night Live. What the fuck happened to USA? Because you had everything in the world going for you.
Okay. On the outside, I looked like I had everything in the world going for me. But as I often tell people, like a lot of times when I was on stage, and I've talked about this, where people thought I was really aggressive and in charge. But inside, I was like a little prom girl, yearning for, approval and attention, Now, this is a classic moment in Zoom casting when the host just gets up and leaves.
It doesn't matter. The camera's on you. I got Bianca here. There she is.
Hey, Bianca.
Is that Danny? Who's that?
Hey.
Danny? So, all right. So get back. Bianca wants to hear what the fuck happened when you had this great opportunity at Saturday Night Live. I know about this ball game that you went to with.
Oh, that story is, yeah. That story's been retold so many times that
Yeah, but Bianca doesn't know it.
it's like
Bianca would like to hear the story.
like the Aristocrats. It's been told so many times. The infamous ball game. You know what? Here's exactly.
Wait a second. Go ahead.
Okay,
You were Lauren Michaels' favorite person.
well, maybe for a minute. You know what it was? I was his find. You got to understand that between like after 80, when he left the show, to like 83, nothing that he was, he wasn't doing anything that exciting. He was producing some stuff. And then he did a show called The New Show. And that was going to be like the new Saturday Night Live, except it was going to be in prime time. So I got hired for that. Alan Havey got hired for that. Actually, Joy got hired for that as well. And the show lasted like 13 weeks. And
How much money were you making?
$1,500 a week.
A lot of cash back then.
Considering I'd been making $15 a night at the Improv. And somehow I managed to maintain a coke habit on $15 a night and then like money on the weekend. And then all of a sudden, man, and I didn't know that much about finances, but I knew that they would like take half the check.
Yeah.
So I remember like I didn't have an accountant or an agent or anything. So I went into the accountant's office at NBC, and the guy sees me, and I go, "Hey, man, I just signed my contract. It's for $1,500 a week. How do I not get like all these tax? Because they killed me with taxes. They took half of it last week." He goes, "Oh, well, you have to." He said something about 1099 maybe or something.
Yeah.
So
We didn't know what 1099 was, right?
I thought he
Always
said
paid tax.
99, so I went. Write down I have 99 dependents. And the friggin' guy did. So I wound up getting my whole check every week. And I kept that going for a while until years later I started getting letters from the IRS going like not only did I owe them money, but what I did was illegal. I don't think anybody's allowed to write 99 dependents. So all of a sudden I went from $15 a night, $50 a night on the weekend, to making $1,500 in my pocket. It was like a kid let loose in some candy store, you know what I mean? It was insane. So that was 83. So you got to understand, 2 years went by, and then in 84, Lorne thought so much of me that he said, "Listen, I don't want you to be worrying about money." So he got me what they called a development deal with NBC, where they would give you money basically not to work for another network. So like, can you imagine like an alcoholic cokehead doing sex every night?
Did he know that you were a drug addict at the time?
You know what's really weird? He must have really loved me because
You were like in the.
he would bring me to his apartment, right? And we would hang out. And like Brandon Tartikoff, do you know who he was?
Yeah.
He was president of NBC Entertainment.
He was like
And
the head dude.
He really dug me, man. Me and Brandon really hit it off. And we'd be up in like Lauren's apartment and we'd be doing like drinking, and they'd be smoking weed, and then I'd be like going to the bathroom doing blow. But then like somebody at the table knew that I had blow, so I'd go, I left it in the bathroom behind the thing. So everybody was doing blow, but nobody was admitting it. And we were just sitting there drinking brandy till 4 in the morning. And this friggin' Brandon Tartikoff, man, he was one of the truly greatest men I've ever met in my life. I mean, he was.
Was he doing blow with you?
No, he didn't. He did not. But he liked me so much, man. Like like we would like have meetings and we would take walks, and he would like always look at me and he'd go, "You know what I really like about you? You've got integrity." Like,
what? I've
guy's,
never heard that about you.
Guy's missing something. I think he meant my act. Like, in other words, like, and also because I talked a great ball game. Like, I would talk about how, like,
Speaking of the ball game, man, take me to the ball game that you went to that one day.
Okay.
Yankee Stadium.
You want the whole story?
Take a big fucking sip. Yeah, because we're going to close this after this story, and we're going to come back to you because this is already an hour long. And I'm afraid that the Zoom link may die. So give me that whole fucking story, that infamous story at Yankee Stadium.
Okay. So Artie Lang recently told the story about this that really it wasn't the story. So if you really want this story, it's a bummer to end on. But anyway, there was
It's okay. Rafi's going to take us out.
My best friend at the time was this guy, Paul Greco, who's since died. But he was actually like a fairly well-known character actor. He had like a slant eye. He was in The Warriors. He was in a number of movies. And we were hanging out and we were writing a screenplay together. And this is when like I was really in with Lorne. So we wrote the first draft of this screenplay. And in fact, Paul was crashing on my floor. Remember that apartment I had on 83rd on 40th?
Yeah.
That you had the girlfriend upstairs?
43rd, yes. Constance. Constance Coopy. She's a friend of mine, yes.
Very good. So, anyway, we finished. So I call up Lorne's office and I go, Christina's secretary, listen, I really need to see Lorne. I got this screenplay and I know that like I should show it to him first before I show it to anybody else, because she goes, all right. So they took the meeting. So me and Paul go up and we see him and he goes, all right, I set up a meeting with Shardoff and Winkler. It was one of those guys. It was Robert Shardoff at the Sherry Netherland. So we go. Now you gotta understand, we've been up all night. We hadn't eaten. And I think Paul had a couple of Valium he gave me. And we're sitting there, we pitched the thing, and the guy goes, okay. So we go back to Lorne's office now. It's like a hot summer day. So I knew that Lorne kept a quart of Absolute vodka in the freezer. So I said to his secretary, hey, Christina, you mind if I, she goes, nah, help yourself. Like, in other words, it didn't strike anybody as odd that somebody would be drinking like ice cold vodka at like, 4 in the afternoon, So Lorne comes out of the office and says, how'd the meeting go? So it was great. So he says, listen, I got tickets for the game tonight. Art Garfunkel's coming down. Why don't you two guys hang out and we'll all go to the game. So in the interim time between like the limo pulled up to take us to Yankee Stadium, I finished off that quart of vodka. And by the time it was like the second inning, I mean, I was like in a complete blackout drunk. And, I was starting to really like act wild and, just scream crazy shit. Because I'm sure that I was like gunning beers at Yankee Stadium as well. So Lorne, are you listening?
Yes, I am. So I've seen Lorne, I see the vodka going to the game.
So at one point, things got so out of control. Lorne's best friend was Paul Simon, who had box seats, but he had them on, like we were on the third baseline. He had his on the first baseline. I guess Lauren kept his tickets in case he needed them. So he told Paul Greco, take Dan, take him to the Paul Simon's seat on the first baseline, and then later on, we'll meet you at the limo. So we go there. So I guess I sobered up enough that like we found the limo at the end of the night. So wait, the story gets better. So now we're taking the limo back from Yankee Stadium, right? And I realized I said to Lauren something about his wife, you know, like, hey, I haven't seen her. How's she doing? And he said, Dan, actually, we're getting divorced. And I went, oh, man. And I put my arms around him, like, you know, and I was like, oh, I was like, what? So the limo driver, I told him, stop at the Improv. I want to do a set. So I tried to get Lauren out to come in and watch me do a set at the Improv. So he was having none of it. He just wanted to get out of the limo with that. So for some bizarre reason, whoever was managing that night let me go on. It was like pretty late at night. And I got on and I just did this rambling, drunken monologue where I was just riffing, cursing everything. The next day, the New York Times was following Jimmy Brogan around. And the guy was writing an article about a night in New York comedy. And he ended the New York Times article with, as the night grew late, this young comedian went on stage at the Improv. He angrily ripped apart everything about the club, the business, television. And then he finally ended by ripping apart Elvis Presley and doing an impression of him. And it was me. But they didn't mention me by name, thankfully. So, like, an hour, you know, I'm like waking up, and now it's like after this dreadful night at Yankee Stadium, and I got the worst hangover. You remember, I mean, you drank enough, you knew that feeling of like when you first woke up.
Yeah.
And your heart would be pounding because you knew something really bad had happened, but you just hadn't put it together yet. So
Yes, a million times.
And it's Christina, Lauren's secretary, and she said, Lauren wants to talk to you. I said, oh, no, God. So he gets on the phone, and I said, hey, man, I'm really sorry about last night. He goes, no, it's okay. But we just both know that you can't drink. You need to stop drinking. So I said, yeah. So he goes, oh, did you see the New York Times today? I said, oh, you figured that out, huh? He went, and I'll never forget, he went, yeah, you don't need to be Sherlock fucking Holmes to figure out that was you. So that's how the night ended. That's how the day ended. But actually, I was still hired for SNL. That was the summer before SNL. And then come the fall, when he hired everybody, he called me in for a meeting, and I thought like he's going to tell me like, hey, you know, man, I really tried to support you, but you're out of control. But he hired me, and you know how he hired me? He said, the reason I'm hiring you is, in the words of Jack Kennedy talking to Robert Kennedy about LBJ, I'd rather have you inside the tent pissing out than outside the tent pissing in. So you got a job. And that was it. And then I think I lasted maybe like a month, and then I was in my first rehab, which I really thought that I was like really bottoming out. I was in a rehab. That was like 1985. It was like this posh rehab on the east side. You know, it was like this, better than hotels I'd stayed in. And it all went down from there, buddy, till now, till this podcast. This is the beginning of the comeback.
Well, we have a lot more to talk to you about, but we're going to close this first interview with Danny Vitale right now, and we'll come back to you. Right now, we're going to go out. And before I do, I just want to say this is Randy Credico live on the fly. This is normally Assange Countdown to Freedom. Danny is a supporter of Julian Assange, and we need to have more comedians out there who will speak on behalf of Julian Assange. But this is just, basically an interview with my closest friend in show business, Danny Vitale, maybe my closest friend in life right now, since everybody else has died. You've moved up to the top. You were always at the top, Danny. And so we're going to play.
I could say that I feel, like remarkably, what's the word? Just, I can't believe how fond I am of you for saying that about me. And at the same time, I feel terrible for you that I'm your best friend. I mean, what the future holds is just...
All right. Well, listen,
I love you.
We could talk for about 2 or 3 hours, and we'll do that. We'll do that again, Danny. We'll continue this discussion. This is one of, because you actually merit more than one interview, but we got to get this up online as soon as possible. And that's it. We're not doing this the normal way where I go out with some canned music and a video. We're going to go out with Rafi DeLugoff, and I think he may play Manhattan the way that the great singer, what was her name, who sang Manhattan? I'll take Manhattan, the Bronx.
Ella Fitzgerald.
No, not well. Yes, but the one that it was the one that used to date that comedian that used to work with Red Fox. Slappy White was involved. No, Dinah Washington sang it. Dinah Washington had the best version of it, and we're gonna go out with Rafi playing Manhattan.
All right.
You know that tune, Rafi, or should we play something else?
Of course I know it. Please.
All right. So, hey, Danny, that's it. We're gonna make this very simple and go out with you and take it out with Rafi DeLugoff.
All right, I'm in. Should I stay here or go?
He can stay here, and he's going to play. All right, Rafi DeLugoff. See you next week, folks. Very soon. I'm Randy Credico. This is Randy Credico live on the fly. I'll take Manhattan. The Bronx is that. Island 2. And going to the zoo, I think. See you next week. Thank you, Kelly Lane, who is on the other side. She's the engineer, does a brilliant job, and she had to put up with you and me rapping about ourselves, bullshitting. See you soon, folks. And we'll just take it out with Rafi DeLugoff, okay? I'm gonna move out of the way. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.